One way to create drama in a shot is by retiming your video footage. In this tutorial, we're going to explore some different ways to retime video in After Effects, and specifically we're going to focus on three methods: interpret footage, time stretch, and time remap. Let's start by opening the 01 Retime Interpret Footage composition in the project panel. So double click on it, and you'll notice in the timeline I have a piece of footage that's 59.94 frames a second. But with the composition selected, you can see up here the composition is 29.97 frames per second. If I press the spacebar to play back, you notice it's playing in real time. By default, After Effects will render at the composition's frame rate settings. So if I want this footage to play back more slowly, I need to change it somewhere else. I'll press the spacebar to stop playback and open the footage folder in the project panel. Select the juggle video file that's in there and press Ctrl D on Windows or Command D on the Mac to duplicate. Let's right click on the new duplicate copy and go to Interpret Footage, Main. Under frame rate, let's enable Conform to Frame Rate and change it to 29.97, which is half of 59.94. Go to the bottom and click OK. Now, let's rename this clip. Press Enter, and then we'll rename the end of it 29.97 and press Enter. Let's see what this looks like. Drag the video clip to the top of the layer hierarchy in that timeline, and sure enough, now it's 30 seconds long. If I press the space bar, it's going to take a second to load up the frames, and then there we go. It's playing back at half speed. The beauty in this is the fact that After Effects isn't having to create any additional frames out of thin air. It's just playing each individual frame since we shot it at 59.94 and we're only playing it back at half the speed. I'll press the spacebar to stop playback. Let's open the 02 Retime Time Stretch composition. Double click on it in the project panel and select Layer 1. Right click on Layer 1 or Control click if you're on the Mac and go up to the time settings and choose Time Stretch. My favorite thing about Time Stretch is its ability to specify duration. So go to New Duration and let's set this to 20 seconds. So if I type 2000, that's 20 seconds long, and the retime will start at the layer in point, which is exactly what I want, and I'll click OK. If you press the space bar, it's going to go ahead and load up those frames. Now notice it's playing back more slowly. I'll press the space bar to stop playback. Let's go back to the project panel and double click on the 03 Retime Time Remap composition. Go down to the timeline and select Layer 1, and you can right click on the layer or Control click if you're on the Mac and go to Time and choose Enable Time Remapping. Immediately you'll get two keyframes. What these keyframes record is that frame at that specific point in time. So if I move my current time indicator to about 4 seconds in the timeline, I'll say 4:01. And I go over to the left side of the timeline and click the Add Keyframe button here between my two navigation arrows. I have now locked that point in time to this keyframe. So if I want the first 4 seconds to play back over 2 seconds, I'll just drag this to the left. And now when I go back to the beginning and press the space bar, you can see she's going to be playing back much more quickly and then slow down afterward. To get a visual representation of this remap, I'll press the space bar to stop playback, click on the words Time Remap in the timeline, and then enable the graph editor. Go to the second button from the left in the bottom of the timeline and click on that, and I want you to choose Edit Value Graph. Here I get a graphic representation as to how the retime is working. Now let's see what happens if we move the keyframes here in the value graph. Click on the second keyframe and drag it up. And indeed, it is changing the value of that keyframe. Now it's going to play the first 6 seconds of video in the first 2 seconds. Let's investigate the steepness of the line. If I move my current time indicator back to the beginning and press the space bar, the steeper the line, the faster the footage. The more flat the line, the slower the footage. Now I'll press the space bar to stop playback and just grab this third keyframe and drag it down. and you can see the line is now going in a downwards fashion. When I press the spacebar now, you can see it's definitely playing backwards. So if you're lucky enough to be involved in the production process, whenever you know you want to slow footage down, it's always wise to shoot at a higher frame rate. The more frames you have equal greater flexibility during post-production.